I stumbled upon an unbelievable truth about our ancestors' terrifying migration. I should have never let my curiosity get the best of me. I never should have opened that door, but the whispers drew me in. They called to me like a moth to a flame, and I found myself standing at the threshold, heart racing, breath shallow. It was a dimly lit room, shadows creeping across the walls like fingers of darkness reaching for something lost. I was just scrolling through dusty old records in my grandfather's attic. Nothing out of the ordinary. The air was thick and stale, filled with the scent of mothballs and age. I thought I'd find old photographs or maybe even a hidden treasure. But as I flicked through faded pages, I came across a tattered journal, its cover worn and frayed. Upon opening it, the words leapt out at me like wild animals in the night. Descriptions of ancient migrations. Stories of our ancestors fleeing from ominous shadows, ominous, as if they had chased them across continents. I read about dark forests that whispered secrets, mountains that loomed like giants, and rivers that twisted like serpents. It was terrifying. It felt real. Goosebumps shot up my arms. An air of dread settled as I turned more pages. The ink bled like blood, fueling my imagination. I pictured them terrified, desperate, running from something unknown. A chill wrapped around me. Was that movement? I glanced around, half expecting a figure to slip past the window, but there was only stillness. My heart thrummed loudly, too loud against the silence. A scratching sound came from somewhere deeper in the attic. It made me flinch, my spine tingling. I tried to shake it off. My imagination, of course. Surely it was just the old wood creaking, the house settling. But then came the whispers again, low and chilling. They seemed almost human, as if the walls were trying to recount a dreadful tale. My head spun. I felt watched, a part of history I couldn't understand. Then I heard a loud bang somewhere in the far corner. My breath hitched. The journal slipped from my grasp, thudding against the floor. Was something in this house alive? Or was I simply losing my mind? The shadows flickered and danced, mocking my growing fear as I dared to take a step closer to the sound. What was up there? The chilling air tightened around me. I reached for the doorknob, trembling. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, to close the door and return to the safety of the outside world. But I was too far gone, the ache of curiosity pulling me in. My heart pounded like urgent drums. And then, suddenly a figure shifted in the darkness, just beyond my sight. I froze. A scream built in my throat. The air thickened. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in the silence, and the hairs on my arms stood up. Before I could react, the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening crash, plunging me into an abyss of confusion and fear. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Panic surged through my veins as I stumbled backwards, pressing myself against the cold, splintered wood of the far wall. My mind raced with questions I couldn't dare articulate. What had just happened? The unmistakable sound of something heavy scraping against the floor echoed in the darkness, sending tremors of dread crawling up my spine. The whispers had grown louder, now an incomprehensible chorus of tortured voices droning in an otherworldly harmony. They seemed to swirl around me, weaving between time and space, each murmur resonating with the essence of despair. Flee, flee now, they beckoned, a command mingled with terror, yet anchored by an inexplicable sorrow, rattled, yet driven by a need to know. I moved hesitantly towards the center of the room, where only slivers of light dared to penetrate the void. Dust particles danced in the air, illuminated like lost souls in search of solace. My fingers grazed the walls, feeling patterns etched into the wooden beams. It was as if the house breathed around me, pulsating with a sinister life force, yielding secrets of generations carved into the very structure that now entombed me, and then I felt a rush of cold air sweeping through the room, like a breath from a hidden lung. I paused, every instinct clamoring to warn me, yet I pressed on. Revealing a small panel hidden behind a rotting tapestry, I tugged at the edge, and it creaked open, revealing a yawning darkness beyond. Outside, night had claimed the world, the stars hidden by heavy clouds, a shroud of ominous promise hanging in the air. Against all reason, I stepped into that space, driven by a mix of terror and profound curiosity. My foot landed on cold stone steps that spiraled downward, leading into shadow. The whispers lingered, echoing off the walls, urging me further into the depths below. As I descended, each creaking stair sent vibrations up my legs, an unsettling reminder of how alone I truly was. Flickering visions flared in my mind, figures darting through the woods, shadows that danced with purpose, and a pale visage that hovered just out of sight. I couldn't help but feel something was down there, watching, waiting, feeding on my fear. Then, in the eerie fluorescence of a single, cobwebbed light bulb that swung precariously from the ceiling, I glimpsed something moving. My heart seized in my chest as I turned my gaze. It was a reflection, not of me, but of a pallid figure standing behind me, its gaunt face an amalgamation of defiance and sorrow. I spun around, breath hitching in my throat, but all that met my wide eyes was the suffocating weight of stillness. Where had it gone? I was fumbling for clarity when the ground beneath me grumbled, and the walls began to whisper anew, this time with urgency. "Show us the way back." A swift shatter of glass shattered the oppressive quiet, echoing ominously. I turned my head. Had that been from above? I darted towards the narrow entrance, adrenaline surging through me. But as I reached for the passage, it was then I heard it in a menacing whisper, more deliberate this time, laced with a chilling promise, "You're one of us now." The lights flickered violently, plunging me into darkness for a heartbeat, and when the illumination returned, the space was filled with an icy presence. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach, and there it was again, the figure, now standing in the flickering shadows, eyes hollow and dark, a mouth twisted in a ghastly grin. Before I could react, the heavy door behind me banged shut once more, sealing my fate. My vision narrowed, dread clawing at my throat as I took a step backward, heart racing, for that thing was no longer just a shadow, it was real, and it was hungry. With every ounce of strength, I gathered myself to scream, but as the figure lunged forward, everything went dark, and in that darkness, I felt the icy grip of ancient horrors begin to entwine around me, pulling me into the unknown depths of our ancestry's fear. What had I awakened? The darkness enveloped me like a suffocating blanket, pressing against my skin and stealing the breath from my lungs. I could feel the presence coiling tighter around me, the sensation of icy fingers grazing my neck sending shards of electric terror cascading through my body. Panic surged anew as I struggled to make sense of the void that had swallowed me. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the night, reverberating off unseen walls. It was a whisper meant only for me, brushing against the fringes of cognition with a menacing promise. "We are many, but you are ours." The weight of those words sank deep into the pit of my stomach, and my instinct was to flee, but the dark held me captive. I blinked, trying to adjust to the oppressive gloom, but all that greeted me were shadows that seemed to writhe and undulate with a life of their own. I extended my hand, fingers trembling as they sought reassurance against the unseen space around me. They brushed against the cool, damp stone of what felt like a wall or perhaps a tomb, crumbled into weathered stories of despair. Then came the whispers again, urgent and insistent. "Remember, remember," their insidious sounds intertwined with visions of other faces, gaunt and hollow like the one I had glimpsed before. They flickered in my mind, pale and tortured, narrowing like a noose around my memory. My ancestors' desperation clawed at my throat. What truth was hidden here? There was a fragment of familiarity buried beneath layers of horror, teasing my consciousness like a cruel specter. I thought of the stories, ancient myths passed down through generations, tales of a great migration, a desperate escape from something that had pursued our lineage through darkened woods and mist-cloaked valleys. The light above me flickered again, and with it came an immense dread. I realized I was not alone, they were all around me, lost souls tied to the threads of this place. Join us, they pleaded, their voices blending into a cacophony of forgotten histories. We cannot leave until you remember. The sensation of being pulled deeper into the dark was overpowering, an inexorable force that filled the very air I was gasping for. Panic ignited my senses as I staggered backward into a wall, my back pressed against something damp and warm flesh. The thought made my skin crawl. Who are you? What do you want? The tremor in my voice betrayed my weakness. A chill carved its way through the air, wrapping around me like a serpent. The truth must be unveiled or doom shall reign. The figure that had haunted my steps began to take shape in this murky void, its outline sharpened by a brilliance I could not comprehend. You must know before the night ends that I could hear it now, the distant echo of a beata rhythmic pulsing that mirrored my heart. It drew closer, weaving through the shadows like a song. As I clung to the wall for support, I understood, it was the sound of the ancestral call, summoning me into the depths of my own history, urging me to confront whatever terror had been laid bare in the marrow of my blood. Suddenly, the light above flickered violently and died, plunging me back into the oppressive void. A wave of icy air washed over me, and I could swear I felt a breath at my ear, a hot whisper of secrets and fear that set my very bones quaking. They are waiting, it hissed, the promise echoing with a grisly weight. From the depths of darkness, I felt the ground tremor beneath me. I stumbled, fingers clawing against stone as I fell to my knees. The sound of movement escalated, an overwhelming rustle like the sound of a great storm brewing. Then came the scent, decay, mingled with something sweet and metallic, as if promise and peril danced together, waiting to claim their due. Suddenly, the walls around me shifted. A horrifying realization pierced the fog of my mind. A truth both glorious and horrific. This place was alive, breathing like a predator hungry for its prey. The walls split open in shrill screams of wood and stone, a horrifying maw yawning to reveal passageways lined with ancient relics twisted with malevolence. That I was no longer acting purely on instinct, but now with a haunting urgency. If I didn't run now, I would be lost forever in the legacies of my family's dread. As I leapt forward, a chilling voice echoed through the chambers, a triumphant roar of a past long buried. You awaken the past, let us feed on your fear. And at that moment, I burst forth into another room, but whatever lay beyond was far worse. The flickering remnants of candlelight revealed rows of grotesque figures lined against the walls, their mouths twisted into eternal screams, their eyes hollow and sightless. I was surrounded by the depths of our ancestors' nightmares, and their gaze fixed upon me with terrifying hunger. Frozen in horror, I realized I had not escaped but merely stumbled into the center of my own ancestral terror, and the door to true darkness was now wide open for Meverly. A breath away, their voices crescendoing into a cacophony that promised oblivion. Before I could digest this reality, the candlelight extinguished, leaving me in suffocating blackness, with the chilling realization that I wasn't alone anymore. Something was moving in the shadows, and it was coming for me. The silence that followed was like the calm before a storm, pregnant with fear. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the whispers that swirled in the darkness, merging with my racing thoughts. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing upon me, the grotesque figures of my ancestors lurking just beyond the fringes of perception. Panic gripped my mind as I recalled the cold, hungry promise of the echoing voice, a darkness willing to devour me whole. That I, in my frantic grasp for sanity, I fought against the suffocating gloom, straining to hear anything that would guide me. A faint rustle broke the thick veil of silencia, shuffling, a skittering echo that seemed impossibly too close. Despair surged through me as I backed against what I feared was another wall of those unspeakable souls. I had become utterly unmoored, adrift in an endless sea of despair, but still, I pressed onward through the void. The air thickened around me, almost taking form. It was both humid and freezing, wrapping violently around my limbs. Each shudder in the atmosphere felt like the caress of skeletal fingers brushing against my skin, igniting every nerve in my body. I inhaled deeply. Sharp musty scents assaulted my senses, rancid flesh, forgotten memories, and the tinge of blood mingled with the stench of ancient rot. This was a sanctuary of horror. That I stumbled forward, and as if in reaction to my movement, the oppressive dark quivered. The shadows twisted around me like a living cocoon, pulling me deeper into their embrace. Do not resist. The words coiled around my mind, seductive yet sinister. It felt as though the walls themselves throbbed with that voice, urging surrender, promising revelation. As I moved deeper, seeking the mere glimmer of light that could pull me from the abyss, I found it a dim, pulsating glow threading through the cracks of the walls. It flickered with a rhythm that resonated in time with my heartbeat, an irresistible lure enticing me closer. "Find us," the shadows whispered, echoing through the void with urgency. "Only through the blood will you see." With trepidation, I approached the glow, the shimmering light revealing itself to be a grotesque scene. A mural sprawled across the chamber, dark and sinuous figures entwining in an infernal dance, their forms shifting and writhing with an otherworldly energy. The faces depicted were familiar, etched with a ceaseless agony from our lineage, mouths frozen in despair as they screamed soundlessly for freedom yet remained bound to this haunted place. Just as I dared to reach out to touch the surface, a violent tremor shook the ground. The floor cracked underfoot, and I stumbled, barely catching myself as the chamber roared with the echo of tortured wails. The shadows lurked ever closer, closing in upon me like a tightening noose. "Remember," they hissed madly, a cacophony of voices rising and falling, drowning in an urgent plea. "Only through remembrance can you be free." Instinctively, I fell against the mural, my hand brushing against the faded hues of pain. Images flickered across my mind, a vision of my ancestors fleeing through dark woods, pursued by something vile and unrelenting. I saw faces twisting in terror as they crossed ancient thresholds, bonds spilling blood into the earth with every step. Before I could comprehend the magnitude of what I had uncovered, the paintings shimmered and seemed to breathe as if awakening from slumber. A skeletal, ashen hand shot out from the mural, snatching my wrist in a vice-like grip. I gasped as icy tendrils crept up my arm, latching onto my flesh. Panic surged anew, clawing at the corners of my mind as I struggled against the relentless pull, the voice now screaming, overlapping in a frenzy. "Join us. Become part of the cycle." As my heart raced, I understood in that fleeting moment the shadows had come to claim what was theirs, to feed on my fear and despair. I felt the weight of generations pressing in, urging me to join their eternal torment within the very marrow of our family's dark legacy. The mural's grip tightened, and in a desperate gasp, I tore myself free, sprinting away as the shadows writhed in fury. I dashed toward the far end of the chamber, where what I hoped was an escape lay waiting. The ground rumbled beneath me with the thunderous pulse of ancient spirits desperate to reclaim their own. Just as I neared the edge, a deafening howl erupted behind me, an unnatural sound that reached into the deepest recesses of my soul, pulling me back toward the darkness. I dared to glance back, and the figures had begun to peel away from the mural, their forms unfurling from the painted spikes of despair, mouths wide, leading into the void that yearned to swallow me whole. Before I could react, the floor beneath erupted into fissures, and I was pitched into fear itself, a chasm of silence where anguished wails converged into an all-consuming darkness. I fell, plummeting into a grotesque new horror, and as I gazed upward toward the fading light, the echoing words echoed in my mind, "You cannot escape your lineage, your fear is our feast." And then, the nothingness engulfed me, silence falling like an iron curtain, leaving me in a void that promised only terror. The darkness wrapped around me like a shroud, suffocating and thick, an abyss where not even the tiniest glimmer of hope could penetrate. My fall felt eternal, the sensation of weightlessness giving way to the horrifying realization of descent into something primal and ancient. My breath was stolen, a mere whisper in the churning void, and the darkness pulsated like a malevolent heart. Then, abruptly, I landed not on solid ground, but on something slick and damp. A suffocating odor filled my nostrils, clung to my skin, an abominable amalgamation of decay and despair. I lay still, heart hammering wildly against my ribcage, afraid to move lest I awaken whatever lay in this harrowing blackness. As I cautiously pushed myself up, feeling the cold reality beneath me, my fingers grazed a surface that was disturbingly alive, convulsing under my touch. I recoiled, breath hitching as the murky familiarity clawed at the edges of my mind. "Not again," I murmured, stifling a scream as I realized what I was kneeling upon, earth mixed with carrion, transformed by the weight of too many lost souls. "Join us," the whispering shadows teased, coaxing my despair out into the open, eliciting a response I could feel vibrating through my marrow. The words were a chorus of promises draped in malevolence, wrapping around my mind like a serpent suffocating its prey. Would I succumb to them, like so many before me? My hands trembled, grazing the surface again, and suddenly, it was not just the ground I felt but an insidious depth that beckoned from below, a cavernous maw that craved my very essence. Suddenly, the silence fractured, and I heard its sound of shifting, clattering bones echoing in a rhythmic dance, strumming a sinister heartbeat of unearthly nature. It rose around me, enveloping me, and then it crashed down like a wave just as the ground beneath me erupted into visions. The darkness cast aside the obscurity, revealing grotesque images etched into the very fabric of this subterranean crypt, a depiction of my ancestors, their faces twisted, mouths open in a silent scream, entangled in a nightmarish tapestry of agony that I was drawn into the collage of suffering, my breath stolen again as I gasped for meaning through the horror that unfolded before me. I saw them, the ones I barely knew, faces like ashes crumbling beneath the umbral weight of their past. They were warriors bound by blood and burdens far heavier than their own, fleeing relentless shadows, trailed by a darkness that clung like mist, hungry for their spirits. They moved through a thicket of twisted trees, roots snaking down like skeletal fingers, clutching their legs and dragging them back toward that which they sought to escape. "No," I whispered, shaking my head in disbelief. This wasn't about fleeing, it was the very cycle of entrapment, drenched in a legacy of despair. The ground vibrated, responding to my realization, and suddenly, the echoes of the tunnel began to rumble aggressively, urging me to see beyond mere bones and terror. With renewed determination, I fought against the urge to succumb to the paralyzing horror. I pushed myself up, the viscous ground yielding beneath me as I pieced together the horrific truth. Our lineage had not merely migrated, they had been hunted, drawn perpetually toward doom by some malevolent force lurking just beyond their sight. "Remember," the shadows breathed insistently, peeling back the layers of my mind. "Remember and claim your birthright." As if in reply to their call, an unbearable pressure enveloped me, reverberating through the earth as great tendrils of mist began to rise, becoming solid forms that swirled around me, a writhing mass of lost souls. Their faces emerged, blank and empty, mouth agape, as if rehearsing an eternal chant of despair. Join us, the shadows swirled and thickened, and the ground trembled beneath my feet, each thud growing more erratic, more desperate. The crypt was a living thing, pulsating with an insatiable hunger, the faint glimmer of hope strangled by the horrors clawing toward me. As the spectral figures grew agitated, twisting into shapes both grotesque and painfully familiar, I could see in their widening eyes that they recognized me, their blood coursing through my veins, echoing the profound grief that bound us. With a heartbeat as my compass, I turned to run, knowing that any hesitation might tether me to their torment forever. My feet, still numb from the ghastly earth, propelled me forward as the shadows lunged, screeching with fury, drowning out reason. "You cannot escape." They howled, their touch brushing against my back with icy urgency. Just as I neared the lip of the chasm, the ground beneath me quaked violently once more, fissures opening like gaping maws ready to consume me whole. Panicked breaths coursed through my mind, and then I saw it, a light, faint and distant, but it illuminated the path that spiraled upward, beyond the cold grasp of memory. I surged toward it, the shrieks of my ancestors trailing behind, clawing at my back. "Don't leave us!" they cried, the shadows tumbling closer. That I fought against the overwhelming despair, racing for freedom. But just as the glimmer of hope solidified into something tangible, I reached the edge, the precipice of salvation, but damnation had its way of twisting fate. The ground crumbled beneath me, my feet slipping as darkness surged ahead, and I screamed into the void, tears streaming down my face, understanding too late that in their shadows endlessly chasing me, I was never meant to flee. As I plummeted into the unknown, the chaos of the abyss consumed me. The horrifying shrieks of the restless souls haunting my ancestry echoed in my mind, intermingling with the agony of my own descent. Time lost all meaning, each second stretched like the sinew of a tortured beast. I expected to hit the ground, but I instead found myself enveloped in a strange, viscous darkness that cushioned my fall, as if designed to prevent my escape. It smothered my senses, wrapping around me, sharing with me the essence of fear woven into its very fabric. I could feel it pulsing around me, a malevolent intelligence suffocating hope, a darkness that understood my lineage, that remembered what I could not. Then silence found me again, a stillness so profound it became unbearable. My heart pounded in my ears, and I focused on the sound of my own breath as it caught in my throat. An instinctual fear gnawed at the edges of my mind. Something was waiting. I shifted, the muck beneath me clinging like phantoms, threatening to pull me back into the depths. Reluctantly, I opened my eyes, but the darkness remained dense, concealing any semblance of shape or direction. However, there was something, a sliver of a whisper, an invitation laced with malice that guided me forward. I crawled, fingers brushing against the ground, feeling the textures of what lay beneath betrayal and forgotten grief. The cold earth seemed to breathe, exhaling stories buried in torment. A familiar warmth flickered in the periphery of my thoughts, a memory long hidden in the recesses of my mind, pulsing like a beacon. With each shuffling movement, I could hear its soft cries of my ancestors once again surrounding me, faint yet insistent. "Do not stray. Do not stray." They urged, their hushed tones weaving a tapestry of despair that tugged painfully at the strings of my heart. They called to me from somewhere deep within the suffocating darkness, beckoning me to understand the legacy binding us together, a lineage not just of blood but of a horror best not unearthed. Then, something shifted, an unseen presence became tangible, brushing against my back like ice. I froze, dread seizing my limbs as I felt it crawl up my spine, seeking entry into my very soul. Whispers erupted around me again, sharper and filled with anguish. "You must choose." A voice roared, shaking the walls of my emerging panic. "You can become one with us or return to face what you left behind." In my mind's eye, I saw them frozen in horror, the twisted faces of my forebears, charged with anger and despair, mouths moving in silent curses, urging me to recoil. "We were hunted," echoed the guttural lament, rising into an anguished skirmish of echoes. "You are the last chance." Fingers trembling, I pressed on, driven by a frantic will that strained against the ever-present pull of darkness. Whatever lay ahead, I could not remain here, ensnared by the loathsome grasp of my kindred's torment. Suddenly, the ground erupted, a shattering cacophony of anguish that swelled with newfound fury. A thick veil of mist unfurled, swirling around me like a hurricane, uncovering fragmented memories that dashed themselves against the cavern walls. The visions tore at me, sending flashes of desperation through my mind, a glimpse of our ancient home, painted with bloodshed and fear, as hunted faces crumpled under the weight of a relentless predator. The end of our line was not just a fate, but a vicious cycle, one that beckoned me to lay claim. At that instant, the air thickened, and the pulsating shadows coalesced into something more. They took form, swirling around me like a tempest of darkness, their eyes igniting with a chilling illumination as they converged into recognizable faces, familiar yet grotesque caricatures of my ancestors who had suffered ruin, summoning me toward a destiny I couldn't quite grasp. "Join us or be hunted," they chorused, voices now a haunting symphony that twisted the air around me. That I caught my breath, heart thrumming, the chilling clarity washing over me. They were waiting for the one who would lead them back to the light or plunge deeper into a legacy forged in darkness. My back collided with something solid, the wall of the cavern encased me, and with nowhere to flee, dread gripped me once more. Then, out of the depths, a figure emerged, dissipating the swirling mass of shadows. It floated toward me, draped in tattered veils that shimmered like night. Their face emerged, lantern-like eyes fixing upon mine, an undeniable recognition sparking between us, a horrific truth hidden deep within the marrow of our blood. Just then, they gestured to the shadows swirling around me. "You see," they whispered, the voice resonating with a familiarity that struck a chord deep in my being. "The choice is now yours. Will you become the hunter, or shall we drag you into the oblivion that consumed us?" In a heartbeat, the past clashed with a vision of the future, overwhelming my senses as dread threatened to crush my spirit. And just as the horror of my choice blossomed within me, the ground beneath began to dissolve into a pit of blackened faces rising from the depths, each yearning to share in the legacy but also to consume me whole. With a fractured cry, I reached out, grasping wildly for understanding, when suddenly, the ground quaked violently again, and the shadows lunged. But this time, they didn't want to join me. They wanted me to join them. As the ground literally fell away beneath me, gripping tight to the echoing voices of the damned, I hurtled into an abyss filled with agonized faces. A terrifying new reality awaited me as the cold touch engulfed my body and mind. Join us, they howled, the shadows erupting with fury as the last glimmer of light vanished, and I screamed into the darkness, realizing too late. I was the vessel meant to lead an army of spirits back to their tormented fate. The plunge felt everlasting, each microsecond elongating into an eternity as I spiraled through chaos, drowning in the cacophony of lamenting souls. The darkness around me throbbed with a living pulse, wrapping tighter, suffocating every breath. I desperately grasped at shreds of my identity, the echoes of my life fading, whispering home's sweet clarity, and yet, amidst the drifting darkness, a creeping dread solidified that I landed in a twilight of fragmented memories, a phantom graveyard where shadows tangled and whispered secrets older than time itself. I instinctively scrambled to my feet, but the ground seemed to shift under my legs, a liquid nightmare that refused to solidify. The shadows pulsed and shrieked, each entity clawing at me with phantom hands that interlocked like unseen chains, reminding me of what lay in waiting. Squinting against the inky darkness, I beheld flickering specters forming shapes of anguish. They surrounded me, faces tortured in eternal screams, eyes hollow and accusing. Figures materialized from the dark. One moment, they were generations past spirits dressed in the attire of their era, but in the next, they morphed into monstrous parodies of humanity, each distortion feeding off my growing panic that I staggered back as a familiar face emerged, an ancestor, her features sharp, torn between beauty and horror. "You must remember," she implored, her spectral hands reaching out, fingers elongating grotesquely, stretching toward my very thoughts, digging into the marrow of my unwilling memories. "Remember what?" I gasped, knee-deep in a mire of guilt, the air thick with despair. "What must I do?" "The migration, it wasn't an escape, it was a sacrifice," she shrieked, her voice distorted yet burnished in urgency. "We were vessels, each one carrying a piece of the darkness. They took our souls, our very essence, cursed us, and in return, we unknowingly became the hunters. We hunted what we feared." Around me, the shadows writhed in agreement, a cacophony of whispers rising into a tortured crescendo. Snippets of broken history clawed at my thoughts, snapshots of their pain, the cropped photos of hunger, desperation, and sacred oaths stitched through blood. Each ancestor that had fled believed in the false light, a sanctuary they never reached. They had become the harbingers of new hunters, the burden falling now upon me. "They draw you," the apparition cried, agony ripping through her voice, each word striking like a dagger. "You can choose to fight or fuel their desires. But the truth bears a cost, and only you can break this cycle." The shadows rushed closer, their clammy essence brushing against my skin, and I stumbled backward, grappling with the weight of her words. With every step, I felt her urgency pulse through the shadows that encircled me, stoking the flames of dread and choice. Panic surged through my veins. What if she was right? What if I had become entwined in their fate, destined to continue the cycle of violence and despair? Then a bone-chilling laugh erupted from the depths, a resonant, eerie sound devoid of warmth. "You think you can escape us? You belong to the darkness now," it jeered, and entities clawed at the edges of my consciousness, dragging me toward what I wished to escape. Join the legacy of the hunters. Stumbling, I gripped my head, trying to make sense of swirling emotions. But the ground split beneath me, gaping wide, revealing a yawning chasm that sent echoes of terrified screams spiraling upward. The faces of my ancestors twisted and contorted, they became prey to the very nightmare I stood against. There was a brief flicker of remorse within their eyes, pleading for release, heart pounding, the air thick with cries of betrayal. I was propelled closer to the brink. Desperately, I clutched at the shadows surrounding me, trying to anchor myself to something real, something true. "What must I do?" I shrieked against the rising waves of terror. "You must sever the bond," the twisted figure of my ancestor screeched, shadowy fingers grasping wildly. "You must confront the hunter." As if summoned by her fearful proclamation, an immense shadow loomed at the edge of the chasm, a figure wreathed in darkness, shifting and pulsating with feral energy. Its eyes glowed an inky black, and as it stepped closer, the air turned frigid, vibrating with an energy that sent tidal waves of dread crashing against my resolve. This was not a visage of vengeance, it was the embodiment of our curse, our relentless pursuit, a hunter, merciless and hungry. And just as I felt the last of the warm memories slip through my fingers, a horrific realization sank in deep. To confront the hunter meant not just facing the darkness within, it meant understanding that, in the end, I was not merely here to remember my ancestors, I was destined to become like them, to lead this fearsome legacy into its darkest chapter. Join us. The whispers screamed, pulling my will as the hunter's dreadful embrace closed in, sealing my fate. My breath caught in my throat, and with one final frantic gasp, I lost my footing as shadows burst from the abyss, dragging me down into their depths. That I thought of my life, the flickering of hope slipping away, and just before I plunged into the insatiable maw of darkness, I spotted a single glowing memoria face from my past that claimed the light amidst the damned, a familiar mark casting the shadow of a choice unheard. And then darkness enveloped me completely, drowning out every last thought. I awoke, heart racing, a cold sweat draping my skin like a shroud. The world around me was a desolate expanse cloaked in an eerie silvery mist that flowed like a restless sea. I lay on the damp ground, flickering memories teasing the edges of my consciousness. The air vibrated with an ominous hum, a sound that seemed to pulse with a life of its own, echoing the tormented cries that had chased me in the abyss. As I pushed myself upright, shadows danced just beyond the veil of mist, flickering in and out like dying stars. The landscape reminded me of a graveyard, but it was a grotesque parody, graves twisted and malformed, names erased from memory as if they had been consumed by the void. I could feel their cold reach, the spectral longing from souls bound to this forsaken edifice, tugging on my spirit like an unrelenting tide. My breath faltered when a slithering breath whispered through the fog, a voice, soft yet echoing with 1,000 sorrowful tales. "You have returned, keeper of the legacy," it hissed, each word coated with malice. I turned, searching for the source, dread curling in my chest like a dark vine. Emerging from the mist was a figure whose outline blurred and swayed like smoke in the wind. The face appeared familiar yet twisted with shadow, a woman, gaunt and wretched, mismatched features swirling like an unfinished portrait. Her eyes were voids, swirling depths that hinted at lifetimes of anguish. "You sought the truth. Now, the truth will seek you." With each step she took, the ground seemed to pulse beneath us, shuddering like the beat of some great, tormented heart. "You think the hunter is your only adversary?" she taunted. "There is a price to be paid, and you are the one who must draw the blood. Who are you?" My voice trembled, fear coiling tightly around my throat. I couldn't help but glance at the horizon. The shadows thickened, a storm of malevolence swirling, dark fingers reaching toward me. "I am but a whisper of your ancestors, a harbinger of the truths that lie buried under layers of deceit. You think you were chosen, but no." Her laughter pierced through the gloom, skeletal and sharp. "They are the ones who chose you. The curse flows through your veins, sharpened by every migration. Each act of betrayal forges the chain that binds you, and in its wake, it hungers." She extended a hand towards me, it was covered in a viscous, black ichor. "You must accept your part in this ghastly dance. Each murmur of the sacrificed calls for their tribute, more souls, more darkness. Do you not feel it gnawing? Can you deny what it craves?" 1,000 voices echoed in my head, a dissonant choir of desperation. I stumbled back, horrified. "No. I refuse to believe that I am bound to this." "Refusal is your burden, and the price of your ancestors' transgressions." Her eyes glowed crimson, the light seeping from her form, igniting the shadows around us. "They are waiting. The hunter must feed, and only a new legacy can forward the hunger." In desperation, I turned my gaze toward the shrouded horizon. The shadows drew near, a roiling mass, crystallizing into familiar forms, the distorted faces of my ancestors, each one twisted in a grimace of anguish, despair radiating like an aura in the gloom. They reached out, pleading for mercy and salvation, mere echoes of their former souls, yet their presence felt suffocating, heavy with expectation. The landscape morphed, the mist thickened, swirling into shapes that looked more like the barren fields where the migration had begun. Fleeting images of desperation and sacrifice unfurled around me, a procession of the damned stumbling towards an unmarked fate, swept into darkness with every hope lost. Suddenly, a bone-chilling roar erupted from behind, a monstrous sound that rattled my very core. The hunter materialized through the mist, its form towering and serpentine, black as the void and spined with tendrils of smoke and shadow. It filled the air with an oppressive weight, reminding me that there was no room for choice left. It had come to reclaim its claim. That I felt the rush of regret and betrayal flood over me as the ground trembled beneath the hunter's approach, and an icy grasp encircled my throat. I searched for an escape, any way to sever the ties, but they were unyielding, tangled tightly in my very essence. Embrace your fate, the spectre of my ancestor whispered, the deep resonance echoing within me. To fight the darkness is to be its vessel. Channel it, fear it not, for only then can you break free. That I felt my heart thundering, resonating in tandem with the hunter's roar. Frozen, I recalled the face I had glimpsed in the moment before. I had Felina flicker of light, a tether I had yet to grasp. And then, beneath the shroud of despair, a spark ignited within my chest, whispering of the possibility of hope even here, among the lost. Step forth, the shadows urged, merging closer, intertwining with my breath. You can end this cycle. All it takes is the blood that binds you to them. The darkness hungers for your acceptance. With horror-fueled determination mingling with desperation, I extended a trembling hand toward the hunter, as an unbidden scream broke from my lips. I'll not allow you to consume me. But as the shadows twisted to entwine me, reality trembled, reality splintering into shards. The hunter lunged, jaws splitting wide, darkness crashing against the purity of my flickering resolve. I could feel the abyss calling, feel the ancient chains pulling taut around my spirit. My body jolted, desperate to break free, my agonizing scream merging with the howling tempest reverberating through my core. In that moment, I glimpsed the first ominous spark of revelation. One horrifying truth caught in the echoes, reverberating in unison with my pulse. I was more than just the keeper of the legacy. I was the bloodleneath creator of the next chapter, the seed of an unending darkness hovering on the brink of awakening. And then everything plunged into chaos, engulfing me in a tempest of shadows and despair, the souls of my ancestry howling as the hunter's maw cracked wide, waiting to reclaim me. The earth convulsed beneath my feet, the shadows pulled, and one truth seized me in an unbreakable grip: there was no escape. Only acceptance awaited in the encroaching maw, where time and consequence merged, and the line between hunter and hunted blurred perilously. As the darkness enveloped me, I felt the pulsating rhythm of the hunter, the weight of ancient debts waiting to be repaid. And then chillingly, I heard it, the signature growl of a feral laugh echoing in my ears, a harbinger of the horror yet to unfold. Join us, it sang as I teetered on the edge of oblivion, one final desperate pulsing thought crashing into my mind: what does acceptance truly mean when the darkness is your own flesh and blood? The world shattered around me, fragments of reality slicing through the air like shards of glass. As the cacophony of anguished wails enveloped me, I felt myself slipping, caught between the frantic reach of the hunter and the relentless pull of my ancestors who festered like ghosts in the shadows. With every heartbeat, the ground surged upward, pulling me into its gnarled embrace. I was the center of a cyclone of darkness, a maelstrom wrought from fear and regrets. Just as I felt the hunter's breath upon my skin, searing and cold, a fleeting image broke through the chaos: a memory of refuge, a fireplace flickering warmly, laughter echoing, promises whispered beneath moonlit skies. Was there a path to that light? Suddenly, a deafening crack shattered the silence. Cracks snaked across the ground, appearing like veins straining in tortured skin. With each tremor, the shadows contorted, shapes roiling and morphing into nightmarish figures, wretched beings stripped of identity. Faces contorted into expressions of agony, their mouths stretched in silent screams, urging me to acknowledge the truth I wished to deny. That I gasped, choking on the fader of despair that enveloped me like incense. Please, the word tore from me, an anguished plea, but the shadows only twisted tighter, wrapping around my throat. Stop. I've had enough. And just like that, the ground opened beneath me, an abyss yawning wide, ready to swallow my scream. The hunter surged from the darkness, a nightmare made flesh, its teeth sharp as razors glimmered, eager for the taste of my fear. Then, for a fleeting second, I perceived a flash of clarity amidst the horror. What if the blood that bound me wasn't just a curse? What if I could use it? I understood then. Our ancestors had endured this nightmare for centuries, feeding this darkness, allowing it to flourish as they struggled with their fate. I could feel the chains, fraying as I fought against the weight of my lineage. With a surge of primal terror, I grasped the tendril of energy twisting from deep within me, a remnant of the bloodline, a flicker of ancestral power. Join them, keeper." The woman's voice echoed, no longer was it just a whisper, but a roar, drenching me in urgency. "Claim your birthright. You are not merely their vessel, you are the one who can tip the balance," that I screamed into the abyss, channeling the desperate cries of my ancestors. "You will not take me." I poured my resolve into the air with every ounce of strength. The swirling shadows recoiled, the hunter's maw snapping shut in uncertainty. The cacophony turned from anguish to bewilderment, their souls suspended in a liminal space, waiting for me to act. With every pulse racing through my veins, I envisioned the firelight, the warmth of home, the connection of blood. I could harness their suffering. Fuel it into something beyond horror, something that could turn against the hunter. The idea ignited within me like a wildfire, illuminating the depths of my despair, but the hunter would not relent. It lunged again, slashing through the shadows as if sensing the shift within me, its roar echoing through the very marrow of my bones. "You think you can defy the cycle? You are bound to it as flesh is to bone." Its elongated form surged closer, tendrils reaching into the void, promising oblivion. Though I felt my veins pulse with the dark energy of my ancestors, I trembled at the thought of losing myself to that very darkness I sought to wield. "Join us," the whispers urged, a grim echoing chorus of desires, memories, and illicit hunger. "Surrender to unify with the essence of the past, only then will you gain the power to reshape our destiny." The reality of that union struck me with profound terror. What if I fell into the darkness rather than mastering it? What if, in the depths of my acceptance, I lost who I was entirely? The hunter's fierce growl rattled my very bones as it lunged for me once more, and I could feel the cacophony of my ancestors grow to a fever pitch, coalescing around me. The shadows began to swirl, forming a cyclone, bold and terrifying, pulling at my essence, dragging me nearer to my doom. Just then, I caught sight of something else in the mystic glimmer, a flicker of movement. At the edge of the swirling depths, a figure emerged, breaking the maw of shadow and light alike. It stood there, unmoving, thick with an unnerving calm amidst the chaos. "Help me," I gasped, a final plea bursting forth. But who it was, I couldn't yet discern through the chaotic reverberations. "Choose," the figure whispered, stepping closer into the fading light, revealing a silhouette ingrained with both grief and hope. "You hold the key to fearing less, to threatening fate itself." But as the hunter's dark presence enveloped the whirlwind once more, doubts coiled around my heart. Could I really control this storm, or would I become yet another soul trapped in its unending cycle? And then, in a flash, I witnessed the outlines of my own hands transform, glimmering with a dark ichor, tethered to the bloodline. My ancestors' voices raged around me, and as the hunter roared, the choice hung heavy in the charged air like a thunderstorm waiting to break. Accept the dark legacy or fight to reclaim the light. And yet, the path to salvation blurred as the figure faded back into the shadows. With time running out, I braced for the impact of fate's fingers curling around me, knowing I was on the precipice of utter transformation. "Join us," the darkness echoed once more, but at what cost? The question resonated through my being as the abyss beckoned ever closer, and I was left teetering on the verge of a decision that could either sever my blood's binding or plunge me deeper into its terror-fueled legacy. And in the moment where the shadows threatened to devour me whole, I understood there was only one way to find out what acceptance truly meant. The ground beneath me shimmered, revealing a grotesque tapestry woven of whispers and shadows, each thread pulsating with airiness, a maddening dance of anguish. I stood at the precipice, where light spilled like trickling water through the darkness, illuminating a path that twisted like a serpent into the belly of the earth. I was surrounded by my ancestors, those souls who had shaped our lineage and bound me to this haunting legacy. "Join us," their voices beckoned, a symphony of torment and desire that coiled and tightened around my heart. I could see their faces, each one a distinct portrait of suffering, twisted mouths forming silent screams and hollow eyes that begged for release. I had become the centerpiece of their endless sorrow, a keeper of their past, an unwitting vessel of their fate. Suddenly, the presence of the hunter surged forth, breaking the dam of shadows that had concealed it. The air vibrated with a primal intensity as it stepped into view, one unfathomable mass of darkness cloaked in terror, its visage both horrifying and captivating. Blood-red eyes glowed with a dark intelligence, and an insatiable hunger radiated from its every breath, sending chills down my spine. "You cannot run from what you are," it growled, the voice dripping with venomous delight. Its tongue slipped out, a blackened wisp darting toward meth embodiment of my own shadow, claiming dominion over my essence. I felt the ground tremble beneath me, a reminder of the cycle of fear waiting to claim me. The choice loomed heavy as chains. I could become one with this darkness, surrender to its hunger and awaken a terrifying legacy, or I could resist, fight back against the countless souls pleading to be free from their eternal torment. But how could I sever a bond forged in blood? Could I emerge from it unscathed? The cacophony of my ancestors roared in my ears. The hunter seeks your surrender. Defy it. Confront its fury. Though doubt clawed relentlessly at my sanity, a flicker of clarity illuminated my mind. I could not simply flee. I needed to confront the darkness within, for it was as much a part of me as the light. Enough! I cried, my voice cutting through the oppressive atmosphere like a blade. I will not be a prisoner. You may have chased my ancestors, but you will not claim me. I am the culmination of their suffering, and I will rise above this. The hunter paused, uncertainty flickering in its eyes. It did not expect defiance. He thrived off the fear that tethered us together. The shadows around me began to churn, moisture seeping from the ground, and as seekers of light, I could feel the yearning in their cries transform into furious roars. The power of the blood coursing through my veins surged like a tidal wave, unraveling the ties that bound that dark legacy to my spirit. That I felt a shifting beneath me, an ancient energy awakening, entwining with the shadows, guiding me toward the essence of my lineage, those sacrificed souls who thrived on fear but longed for freedom. Stand with me! I shouted, channeling every ounce of courage, every vibrant memory of my family clinging to the light, their voices merging into a collective call against the encroaching darkness. We are strong, more than shadows. We rise together, and then, the cacophony erupted. Me ancestors visible now, swirling around me like ribbons of light, pushing back against the dark silhouette of the hunter. We surged toward it, our lineage fusing into a powerful force unbreakable. The hunter's growl echoed, a guttural roar of rage and disbelief. As its energy clashed with the flooding essence of my ancestors, a crack shook through the very fabric of the darkness, revealing an aviding glimmer of bright light within. We were powerful collectively, and together, we would not be consumed. Not like the shattered remnants of the past. With fiery resolve, I reinforced my will, every ounce of ancestral strength pouring into me until I became a conduit between two worlds, the light that yearned for release and the shadows carving their existence in fear. In that violent clash of power, the hunter writhed. Swallowing the fury of my legacy, struggling to reclaim dominance. Then, with one final united breath of defiance, I unleashed the energy coursing through me, casting it outward until the darkness shattered into stars, exploding in a brilliant flash. As the remnants of the hunter dissolved, I felt the chains of despair fall away, the weight of generations lifting from my shoulders. Freedom surged among us, and my ancestors formed a radiant aura, their anguished cries transforming into whispers of gratitude. But just as the light began to ripple through the air, I felt a familiar chill, like fingers grazing my mind, brushing against my consciousness. It was tempting, insidious, as if a voice long buried within still beckoned from the shadows. Your victory has come at a price, it murmured. Those you banished are lost, but we are never truly free. Panic surged anew. What did it mean? As light returned, filling the spaces once ruled by terror, a flicker of doubt ignited within me, and for one disquieting moment, I glimpsed the shadows reforming, faint echoes weaving into existence like haunting symphonies. Oh no, I breathed, panic clashing with hope as dark tendrils began to reanimate, manifesting through the very cracks of the ground I stood upon. Not again. The laughter echoed through the air, enveloping me in cold realization. I may not have succumbed today, but the remnants of darkness lingered, pulsating deeper in the marrow of the earth, a reminder that in the struggle against the dark, some legacies are destined to abide, lurking patiently for the moment to reclaim what they desire. And there I stood, heart racing, nightmares whispering against my consciousness, and I understood yet another layer of the truth. Victory over darkness does not mean it is defeated, and the cycle of fear would always linger. Join us, they beckoned again, pulling gently, reminders of what lay just beneath the surface. It chilled me to the bone as I contemplated, knowing only too well that while I had won the battle, the war with shadows would never quite be over. The last pulse echoed through my veins as I stepped back from the edge, whispering, "Not today." But in my heart resonated a chilling truth that would follow me for the rest of my days. A shadow never truly disappears, and in the depths of ancestry lies an ever-hungry darkness, waiting for its chance to rise once more.